This is Sven Hosford today with the Journal of Lifestyle Medicine. On the phone today with one of our heroes, Dr. T. Colin Campbell. Welcome today, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
We are here to talk about your new movie and the fundraiser that you're doing. You're coming to town on Friday night. I must say, whenever I tell anybody in Pittsburgh you're coming, I get the exact same response. They say, "What? When?" So we're doing the best to get the word out about this.
Oh, fantastic. Great. Thank you.
So in the movie Forks Over Knives, you were the big hero there. You helped discover and put the stake in the heart of the vampire, this whole idea that meat was healthy and dairy was healthy, and you've confirmed all the scientific evidence. And so far as we know, then everything should be fairy dust and rainbows now. You got the science, and you should have met no resistance. Is that what happened?
Well, I would agree to the first. I think we do have the science. I'm really confident now that this really works for most people most of the time for most conditions. The second part of your comment, though, on resistance, that's part of the equation, too.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are those who are quite adamantly opposed to this. There's naturally a lot of people who are skeptical, and that's fair enough. But there are, as I said, some people who are almost taking some offense to this whole idea. And they're pretty tough to work with at times, but they're on the wrong side. And so that's their problem. Well, they'll catch up in time.
Well, God bless you for your work and what you're doing. So the new movie, Plant Pure Nation, you really go into the first level of resistance that you got from legislators and supported by industries and all that sort of thing. Is that right?
Yeah, although I wouldn't say quite so simply as that. That's just one perspective. And that film, of course, is directed by my son, Nelson. I didn't really have anything to do with the storyline that much. He and his producer, who also was the producer of Forks Over Knives, John Corey, I mean, they've created and crafted the story in a very nice way. Obviously, I'm in it for quite a bit. The film, that particular example in the Kentucky legislature is the kind of thing that can occur. We're convinced in any legislature across this country. Just so happens it started in Kentucky because I was invited with my good friend and colleague, Dr. Esselton, to speak there. And there was a lot of enthusiasm at the time, but then it started to break down when, it got into the political world.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting story, but it's the kind of thing just illustrating the kind of resistance that I have seen for some time in the political community.
And this is also in conjunction with a fundraiser you're doing. And tell us about the fundraiser.
Well, my son Nelson, who directs it, directs it, and John Corey, they put together this Kickstarter program. Until now, and the film is essentially 95% complete. We're now on a screening tour of the country and all of that. It's very, very exciting. But to continue this effort, bring it to more places, they need some funding too. Nelson has dipped into whatever little bit he had. We put up some. A few other folks have some too. It's all just private, limited funding. And we've just done the best we can scrape along. So they have this Kickstarter program, and you may be familiar with that. And they've started that. I think they got about 20-some days left on a 60-day program. And they were wanting to raise $150,000 in order to continue, bringing this to more people. That's the secret. We don't have anything left to fund anything, and they're up there around 100 at 150. They needed a little more push, and I let me just say for those who may be listening that the Kickstarter can be found on plantpurenation.com. There's a header there, Kickstarter, and the rewards you get for people giving donations, some of the amounts is there too.
Sure.
So
well, we have all the links up on our website and on this podcast and so forth.
Right. Yeah.
So let's get into let's talk about some of this resistance a little bit. Now, some of it's internal, I think, within the medical industry, and some of it is, of course, in the general public, as you say, the general skepticism. And then there's some other forces at work. But I thought it might be instructive if we could compare this with another big shift in medicine that happened about 150 years ago, which was the development of antiseptics. and the understanding that doctors needed to wash their hands before they cut somebody open for surgery. And this was, at the time, quite controversial, just like the nutrition fight is today, and there was a lot of resistance from doctors. Is this a fair comparison to compare how it took 40-some years to get doctors to wash their hands, and now it's taken like 30 to 40 years now, and that we're still fighting an uphill fight?
Yeah, it's very similar, and just as important, if not more so. I mean, obviously, washing hands, remaining, free of that as much as possible was a good thing. That was a major transition, obviously, in public health practices. But in the area of food and nutrition, we have been living with the wrong idea for quite a long time. And to really get an understanding of what this is all about, it does require a little bit of time to think about, what's at stake here. We do have a lot of assumptions that we make about health and medicine, nutrition, and food, and so forth. A lot of the assumptions are simply incorrect. And they've been incorrect for decades, if not, in fact, considerably longer. And so now, from my perspective, especially, I try to discuss some of these issues, not just in the China study, which is, as has done quite well,
yes,
but also in the second book that I wrote called Whole, that's with the W-H-O-L-E.
Okay.
Came out in 2013. And in that case, I'm trying to draw on some of the historical lessons that we can, pull up and think about. And so it's a challenge, but I can't believe, almost myself, that this approach to food and the way we think about it, how we use it, I can hardly believe that it's having such a spectacular effect on virtually everyone.
Well, I've been reporting on these kinds of issues for about 20 years, and in 2011 found myself in the cardiac ward of one of the top 50 heart hospitals in the world, right here in Pittsburgh, and was being fed high fructose corn syrup and hydrogenated oils with every meal. And I just looked at them dumbfounded. I said, "Don't you understand the science?" And when I finally got the dietitian on the phone 2 weeks later, she said, "Well, we treat mostly old people, and they like their comfort food." And I thought it would have been more comforting if the doctor knew more about nutrition than I do.
Good point. There's not a medical school in the United States who really has taught nutrition. Not one.
Yeah.
There's a few that's offering some material now, but a very limited amount. But there's still a long ways to go. But let me say, on the other hand, that the majority of my lectures in the last 2 or 3 years, and I've given a lot, the majority of my lectures now to medical schools and medical conferences. I'm really gratified.
Well, that's really good to hear. Now there's a lot of forces at work when you look at all the money that's arrayed against you. Let's talk about specifically: is there an indirect or a direct impact on all of the pharmaceutical advertising that kind of gets the public thinking that, well, if diet and exercise won't work, I'll just take a pill? Is that part of the problem?
Well, it is. The industry, in this case, the pharmaceutical industry, they sort of acknowledge, in a sense, diet is an exercise that's fairly important, but they kind of dismiss it by, the comments they go on to make, like, we got something here for those people who can't do that.
Right.
As if, no one can do that, which is foolishness, first off.
Right.
And secondly, the word diet and exercise, that's been with us forever, as you know.
Right.
In this particular case, we're talking about a perspective on diet and exercise, diet in this case. We're talking about a perspective that is just not part of that discussion about diet at all. Yeah. Most of the things that have been said about the diet in the past few decades have been very minimal, very moderate, a little bit here, a little bit there, not terribly interesting, and people are free to choose and still stay with their biases and their prejudices. Mm-hmm. We're talking about, wholesale change.
Yeah. Well,
and that wholesale change really is dramatic.
And so that kind of wholesale change, I think, really needs to be fought on all fronts. It's a full court press. So that's individuals who can test the science for themselves. Correct me if I'm wrong, but anybody can just switch to a plant-based diet. Of course, you must first check with the doctor, who probably knows less about nutrition than you do. But you can switch to one and try it for 30 days and see if it works, see how you feel. Then go have a steak on day 31. So this is science people can prove for themselves.
Well, yeah, we said that in the book in the China study. I mean, I went through with my youngest son, who's now a physician. I went through the evidence, if you will, trying to summarize it, and finally said that to the reader, you don't have to really believe me in all this detail. Just try it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it turns out that, I'm talking about 7 days, 10 days. Yeah. I mean, incredible changes occur in that period of time, especially for people who are in a little bit of difficulty. Yeah. And that's really is featured in the film, Plant Pure Nation, that my oldest son, has crafted. It's just the effect is so dramatic. It's so broad and it's rapid. It's so rapid. Yeah, to see the effects.
Well, so that's what individuals can do, and I think that when people start making those personal changes, we'll see a big shift in the industry. What are some of the big dirty players? Some of the big food companies or products that we should stay away from?
Well, I'm not going to name things at the moment. I'm just going to talk about it in the general class. I mean, obviously, eating whole plant-based foods is the way to go. We have strayed from that model. That's the natural model. We've strayed from that two ways, to say it very generally. We've obviously consumed animal-based foods. That's one way to, stray from that ideal model. Right. The other one, the thing that we've done too, is also bad. We've really gotten into the processed, convenience foods in a big-time way, and that also takes us away from. I mean, looking at it a positive way, the whole plant-based foods, whole fruits, vegetables, grains, and legumes, and so forth. That's the ideal model. And when I say we stray from it, we start, replacing that kind of food. Almost everybody does, with animal-based foods, right? Mm-hmm. So you get two effects. First, you get the harm produced by the animal-based foods, and secondly, you get harm in an indirect way by decreasing the consumption of plant-based foods. Yeah. And the same thing happens with the processed, convenience foods, which are rich in fat, oftentimes in salt and sugar. It's just, in many ways, it's the same model. We're straying from what the ideal is. Yeah. And so in that context, now I've really gotten enthused about talking about the fundamental science of actually 5 different industries that is just flat out wrong. And those 5 industries, I'm talking about a generic way. One is the food industry. Right. The second is the medical practice industry. The third is the cancer industry. The fourth is the pharmaceutical industry. And the fifth is the vitamin supplement industry. The fundamental science, and now I'm giving lectures on that. I am really enthused about this because I can make a case, I believe, quite convincingly, I'm discovering, that if you look at the fundamental science that sort of grounds each of those, the sort of underlays the existence of those industries and the way we do those things, the fundamental science is flat out wrong. It is flat out wrong. So talking about revolution, this beats all of them. I don't know any revolutions in the past going to have to make that kind of change.
I do really appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you. And the half hour after the movie, really get to ask you some questions on Friday night.
Fantastic.